Welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today with our friends from the Esri Education team. We are excited to have you and appreciate you being here. Special thanks to our entire audience for stopping by directionsmag.com for articles, webinars, and podcasts. We are a little different format this evening. We hope that you will ask questions on the chat and download the handouts. The Esri team will follow up with you personally. Also, we appreciate you sharing your opinions on the survey and keep an eye on your inbox. A special welcome back to Charlie, Kylie, and Tom from the Esri Education team. All right, Charlie, over to you.
Thanks, Barbary, and hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with GIS Projects in Schools. Thanks to Directions Magazine for this opportunity, and thanks to you all for coming and spending time with us. And I'm joined by my colleagues Tom Baker and Kylie Donya, and then we have a couple of special guests, Alyssa Larson and Brittany Wedland from Big Lake High School in Minnesota. They're going to share some of their projects with you. And if you're not familiar with Esri, we do GIS software. We make software for people to use in all kinds of industries. And we're all about helping people see patterns and connections and relationships between different kinds of data. And one of the groups that you can see in those industries is education. We're really interested in getting people in schools and on up the line in education to be using these tools to understand the world, to be able to make good decisions. And that's really what this is all about. At our website there, esri.com/schools, and you can see it over there. We want people to see what is possible. Teachers and students out there working with these tools, they can begin to understand the world, which helps them make good decisions and get used to solving problems that way, thinking geographically with GIS. That's our vision. That's our goal. So Esri makes software available to schools, K-12 schools and clubs, for instructional use for free around the world. Software, data, and learning resources for free around the world for schools. So we want people to get in and explore and do that. And esri.com/schools is where you can start. And thousands of schools across the country, and Brittany and Alyssa's school is in one of those red dots there. And some of those dots are bigger because they're representing more schools. So there are thousands of schools across the US and around the world that are doing this. So you can do this. We want people to get started with this. And we're going to start a little bit differently today. We've got a survey that we want people to take. And so you can see that there's a URL that you can type in your browser, or you can use your phone's camera and look at that QR code with your camera, and it'll say, hey, do you want to open up the link? And yes, go ahead and do that. And you can see the two questions that you get. It looks like it's a really short survey. Are there pets in your home? Yes and no. And then put your dot on the map. If you get no, if you say no, it's a really short survey. You just say no and put your dot on the map and hit submit. But if you say yes, you're going to get a bunch of extra questions. So I'll shut up and let you do this. Meanwhile, Tom's going to be getting ready to jump in here. We're going to give you a minute, though. Because there are several questions. Ooh, tension. All right, Tom, you're on. Take it away.
Thanks, Charlie. Excellent. So we're just finishing up with our pet survey. And again, this is something you should share with your students, whether they're your own kids or your classroom students, or maybe you're a geo mentor and you work with a school in your community. This is a great opportunity, especially as the weather starts to get colder for many of us. And going outside to collect data just becomes more and more challenging. The indoor survey here is an awesome opportunity. All right, we're going to revisit the PET survey in a few minutes and explain more about what it means and why it's important. I get to take a few minutes with you to talk about project-based learning, and that is really the instructional strategy, the instructional framework for how projects are often organized in classrooms. And really, because we have such a diverse audience on these types of calls, ranging from, GIS technicians all the way over to veteran teachers, we kind of have to go through some of this to sort of level the playing field. So if you're an expert in this, keep this in mind. Project-based learning, the way we treat it, the way we think about it, is really any inquiry or question-driven learning opportunity that happens in classrooms. And oftentimes those are, if not directed by students, at least negotiated by students with their teacher. Some big considerations to think about. And of course, these are often also negotiated between the teachers and the students. But what is the instructional goal, or what are the learning objectives? What is intended to come out of this experience that students and teachers might go through? And what does the product or what the artifact look like once students have gone through this experience? And of course, the audience. Project-based learning is going to vary in how it looks based on your student age, even things like reading level, background knowledge, could be their technical knowledge. Really, any of these factors will inform and oftentimes influence heavily what project-based learning looks like. Limitations, we at the time this is being put together, most schools are back in face-to-face session, at least to a much larger extent than they were during the last school year. But not all are. Not all have all students going all days of the week. Some are still doing some hybrid work. What do the limitations look like? Both in terms of your students' presence, but also your technology capacities, as well as content that you have available, and things like instructional time, content and pedagogical choices, and then of course data needs. Are you trying to engage in a project that does have a very heavy lift in terms of the data required to really implement it? So when we talk about organizing project-based learning in classrooms, what we're really talking about is using the geographic inquiry cycle. And it's a 5-step inquiry cycle: ask, acquire, explore, analyze, and act. And during these 5 stages, different things are happening. And we're not going to take a deep dive into these, but effectively you begin with the question, you find data to help address the question, you explore the data and build on the data, and then you begin to analyze the work that you, or the data you've amassed thus far, and then you act on it. And a lot of times that act is really about creating some sort of an artifact of knowledge creation that's happened during this project. And of course, this in a perfect world is both a reflective and an iterative process. So students may sort of repeat it as needed. That is largely going to depend on time and resources as well. So let's take a very short look at what some of the core technologies are that often come to bear on project-based work in classrooms. Now, this is certainly not all of them, and I think even my colleagues today are going to address a few more technologies that can be helpful. The map viewer, and all these are part of Esri School Software License, which you'll hear more about shortly. But the map viewer is a way of viewing data and maps, and it allows flexibility for custom map creation and display. We can use it for visual pattern seeking. We can use it for determining some basic types of analyses. Next, we might use Survey 123. We might use Survey 123 as a part of a data collection process, maybe. And as we continue around our circle, we'll go to dashboards. We might use a dashboard to analyze data collected in one of these projects. And lastly, we can use a tool called story maps to help create one type of learning artifact as a result of project-based work. So one thing to keep in mind, and I think it's especially important today because we're going to see a really wide range of projects and project styles, is that when it comes to data collection or acquiring data, sometimes we talk about doing field data collection with maybe a GPS and a phone, or maybe there's a sensor and instrument package. You know, sort of the iconic example of that is perhaps kids down at a stream or creek collecting water quality data. But equally, and probably even more popular, are the latter two, where students are using primary source documents to collect and extract information relevant to a question that's driven them to look at those documents in the first place. And then a third option, and there are more options, but these are three popular ones, is the idea of being able to extract additional data from maps or data that have already been created. And I think you're going to see examples of all these today. So I think first up, we're going to go ahead and share or ask Brittany and team, thank you, to talk a little bit about one of their projects.
Thank you. So your piece there, we were talking about the geo inquiry process, is something that we really became passionate about when we were at a conference. It's probably been a while ago, almost 10 years now. So we have been incorporating more and more GIS, and ArcGIS has made that super easy for us. And so every year we have just been trying to implement more to try to show students the many ways that GIS can be used to solve problems. We try to incorporate local problems, so to show them how it is super applicable to their lives, as well as have them be able to apply it to more global problems. And so we're just going to talk you through two of our favorite projects that we do in our classes. So I'm going to talk you through, it's one of my favorites. We've been doing it in our school for a while, and then we just added the GIS part to it as technology and ArcGIS became available to us. So I'm going to talk through that one, and then my twin, who is also a social studies teacher here at Big Lake, Alyssa, is going to talk you through our other one. So this city planning project, the goal of it is for students to solve a problem that is relatable to them. So they are given the task of trying to decide what is a business that our town is lacking, and how can they use GIS, the process of inquiry, as well as use GIS tools to solve that problem. And so you can kind of just see the main highlights of it here. We're going to be using a few different ArcGIS skills. We're going to be going through the geographic inquiry process, and then also gives them that ACT part of it, where students are going to then try to connect it to the community and see how it would make a difference. So clicking forward here, what we do when we do GIS projects, generally we make them super step-by-step. And we've already, at this point, when they do this project, they've done some scaffolding already with some easier activities where they become familiar with the map tools. But I'm going to click over here so that you can see the document that the students would work through. So this one is, of course, catered to Big Lake. So you'll see that they'll be utilizing the city zoning map. So prior to knowing about ArcGIS, probably 10 years ago, I was using just a PDF of the zoning map. And then when I became familiar with ArcGIS, Alyssa at her school at the time, she was in Waconia, they had their zoning map built in. So I reached out to the city planner and then found that they had the data. All I had to do was import it. And thanks to Charlie and everybody at ArcGIS, who's so helpful, they helped me learn how to just import it, and it was super slick. So then students will actually use this map to figure out where is a good spot to put their business. So the directions walk them through it. So they add that zoning map to their map, and we have them use organization accounts that then they can save it And then you can see here that they will then choose a restaurant. We've expanded it in the last couple of years. That doesn't have to be a restaurant. So if they're super into hunting or whatever interests them, then they can do that, because we've obviously found that if it's something of interest, we're of course going to get more buy-in. So then they're going to choose a location for their restaurant. And so we talk to them about it has to be a commercial location, and we go through that, again, trying to make it as realistic as possible. And then of course they'll zoom in and then find their spot, they'll add a pin and do all that. Then what they're going to do, and the part that we think is really cool, is where they have to then find map layers that will help support their business being successful. And so we give them a few layers, as you can see here, that we found through the years, and actually some of these other students have found as they're researching and finding different ones, just to get them thinking. So then their goal is to then find those map layers, add them to their map, and then they use that to find data. And so what's really cool is that we teach them about how much information you can get from these map layers, that not only can you get information from the key, but a lot of them, this one, I'm not going to take the time to add another map layer to it, but if we were to add one, for example, about population growth, oftentimes if you click on the map layer, it'll give you more information. So this one's pretty simple with it just saying zoning. But other ones have more data, and then the data will change as you zoom in and out. So then they're going to be utilizing this graphic organizer to help them along the way. So we have students of all levels in our geography classes, and so we've really tried to make it something where we can help those who are lower level learners, need a little bit more help, and then those who are higher level. So we break it down so then they're just going to fill in information about each of these layers. So then they're going to then also take a screenshot of each map layer and then write some things that they can learn from it. So it starts off with just basics about the layer in general. And then they get into more specifics about the layer itself, trying to really find the facts that pertain to their location. So maybe it's telling them the population growth for the future, or it's telling them how many other locations are in the metro area of whatever business they're building. Other things that we have them do is also consider other applicable facts. And so we'll notice here too that they can add in information that may seem relevant. So again, if they're arguing why we should have, a Chipotle in town, they might also want to incorporate other Mexican restaurants that we may have in the town. So they can also add that in too. We also wanted to make this a little bit more cross-curricular. So we've added the feature at the end where they will then turn this into a short essay where they have to argue why their business will be successful. The cool thing about it is after they've built all of their arguments using the map layers, then they can go back and they can put together their arguments to defend why their business would be successful. So you can see here that we walk them through the process of creating larger arguments. So again, like if their layer is a Google map, for example, then maybe we would argue that it would be unique to the area, would be their theme. Or if it's a map that shows population growth for the future or average family size, you might do like perfect for families would be your argument. Again, just trying to help them think about how they can use the maps to help argue their point, or AKA solve this problem. So then this is more of just like building an essay, walking them through that, and then they will type their essay below. And what's really cool is that because we have organization accounts, then we're able to then go in and see what the students are building and then be able to give them proper feedback. So a couple last things about this that I wanted to mention. Here's just a few students working on it through the years. So you can see them looking at their different layers. It's really interesting. We've been getting emails back from students as they've gone off to college and the world beyond. And they all say, not all, but I get feedback saying, oh, wow, we were actually using ArcGIS in college and we understand it. So it's really cool to incorporate student choice, have them go through that inquiry process. They're having to problem solve, finding information. And as I already mentioned, it's really great to be able to modify it for different abilities, and then obviously encouraging literacy throughout all of this. So our next project that we wanted to share with you really is kind of another example to show students that we aren't just going to use this technology in one unit, but then how you can actually use it for multiple different topics. And so we use this in our second unit, and this is incorporating not only the ArcGIS mapping components, but then also story maps. And so again, just kind of using those geospatial skills that they learned in the first part of the course and continuing it on. As you're going to see with this project, like the previous one, we can easily modify this with different skill levels, which is something that we do quite a bit with our students. So the first thing that I wanted to just kind of walk you through is similar to the previous project that Brittany took you through. We kind of have a very step-by-step process for this as well. So you're going to see that this also is a Google document that kind of has all the information that they will need and research, and then they'll use it to incorporate into their story map. So for this project, we give each student a different country of the world, and we try to pick countries that are not used as often and ones that students don't already know about. And then they right away dive into just some basic knowledge about the major populations and city centers. And then they go into ArcGIS, and we have some kind of specific map layers that they will utilize in order to kind of help them learn. You can see here that we get them back using those skills of adding symbols and map notes and whatnot. But then, like I said, they go in and take a look at some population data and just kind of get a feel for where their country is, and again, just like kind of the foundational elements of their country. And then they go and add some information to their map about weather and climate before they finally go in and actually do some research on their own about the culture. So this is the only part of the project that is not on ArcGIS itself. We have them use different more web, like text background information sites. And then once they have this all filled in, then they're going to go ahead and actually make a story map. And the thing that we really like, and that students have shared with us that they like about the story map, is that it looks more professional. It has more of that almost website look to it. And so you can see, before I show you our example, we're very specific about what they need to include as in regarding the number of maps that they can then actually link from their ArcGIS account, because all of this was, of course, is within the same family. And then they have to incorporate, like I said, the information that they did in their research. So I'm just going to show you an example, and then I'll kind of walk through just the final things within this. But what we love about this is that, again, it saves really easily. Students can access it really well. And so there's a lot of customizations that students can kind of choose. Again, just like Brittany said with our previous one, we found that student choice is really powerful. And so here's one that we just did on the basis of Nepal. Notice here we have incorporated a an ArcGIS map. You can see that it's still very much, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, and then also some text, another map, and then another cool thing you can add too is it allows you to incorporate videos too, and there's all, like I said, all kinds of design elements that you can take with it. So, like I said, this project is just really great for getting kids to have a more personal touch, but by also having structure and using those skills that we build on throughout the entire part of our course. So, and then the final thing that we use with this project is you can obviously share it. And so we have students then be able to view each other's projects and then learn from one another. So both these projects are just really great about, again, encouraging them to kind of see how this technologies are really relevant. And then also our big push in our school is literacy. So all of that kind of combines together. So I think that was kind of hopefully a great rundown of the projects that we really enjoy using in our class. And we hope you found that beneficial to you in your classroom.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Alyssa and Brittany. That's great to have. Man, what a fun way to teach across the hall from each other in the same school, and to go through those projects. to have students going through these projects and getting accustomed to it. That's what we're really looking for. A few years ago, I put together a project that is, I want to talk about right now because it's a different kind of a design for a project. And you can read about it at esriurl.com/funwithgis206. That's the blog that talks about it and introduces this activity that is called the Community Round Mile. And I'm just looking at the very top of this activity that walks you through how to do this. And the design of this activity is for people to figure out a space that is a circle, a round mile, a square mile. You all know a square mile, and you think about it as a square, on 1 mile on a side. Well, I want a round circle. I don't want a square. I want a round circle. And okay, so you got to figure out where you're going to put the center of this. And I asked people to put the center near the school and then walk through a set of steps to create this buffer. So they got to do analysis. So that means they have to have publishing privileges in order to accomplish this. And then to go and enrich this buffer with some data. So they're doing enrichment now. And then to enter some of this data that they've gotten in a submission project so that people are actually doing 3 different projects in this. There's a data gathering process, there's a data submission process, and that's part of a national project. But then what's really interesting is that if students have gone through this and seen how the teacher did this, or if they've all done it together and they've watched the whole process in operation, what's really exciting is then to get into the data comparison process where, okay, we could take a look at the other people's data around the country, but hey, teacher, it would be much more fun if we all got to do this about our state, our part of the world, our 12 counties around us. And we want to do this around the places that we're really interested in. And we don't want to gather the half dozen data elements that Charlie set up. We want to gather our own special data elements. This is learn the process in doing the setup of this project, submit your data, and then have your students go through the same kind of a process, but about the area that they know, the areas that they're interested in, and see how these things compare apples and apples, compare these round miles about different places in your state or in the country, if you like to do it that way. So this is a neat project for people to go through and to see what it's like to do a collective project on their own individually and then compare with others. All right, I'm now going to turn it over to Kylie. Kylie has got a project that she wants to walk you guys into as well.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Well, I just love hearing all these different projects, right? But one of the things that I'm really passionate about is actually doing data collection with your class and with students. So at the very beginning, you got to fill out a pet survey. And that's kind of what we're going to dive into a little bit right now. But let's talk a little bit before we go in there. So I could hear places where a survey might have helped in the project Brittany talked about with restaurants, right? Maybe the class wants to add information about the types of restaurants people in their community would be interested in. And they want to ask people these questions and put on a map their feedback and be able to add that as one of their layers. What if in Charlie's project, they wanted to add information they know about their own round mile onto the map? So what this is a tool that I want to show you called ArcGIS Survey 123 that allows you to create surveys and go out and do some data collection. Now, you will find this very similar to Google Forms, but it has a map, which is the really powerful part because we're going to be able to bring it right on onto the same maps that you've been seeing. So let's go ahead and first, let's talk a little bit about Survey 123. So you can see here I have it open in a browser, and I can create surveys here and do all those kinds of things. But before I go in and do that, I want to talk a little bit about filling it out, because that may become important as part of this process, right? You can create a great survey, but if no one can answer it, it's not very good. So understand that when you're filling out these surveys, you can be doing that in a browser, like we're working right now, or in an app that you install on a phone or tablet. So you can fill these out on a laptop, on a Chromebook, on a phone, on a tablet, all these different places. And you and your students can be successful with pretty much whatever devices you have available to you. Now, the authoring experience is something we're going to dive into a little bit here, but keep in mind, again, similar to Google Forms with a map, you're going to be doing drag and drop authoring. It's pretty intuitive interface, but some good tweaks that you can set up to really author good surveys. And that's really what's powerful about this. It's not the fact that I can make a survey, it's about the discussions I can have around data as I'm creating this survey. So what are we doing here, right? We're gathering data. Well, what do we want? Well, I want the best data I can get. Well, how am I going to get the best data? Well, I need to ask a good question. I need to maybe restrict the answers. So let's dive in and see how I can do some of these things. So you filled out the pet survey, and we're going to go in now and look at how you could create that. So I'm just going to start with a blank survey here. And what it's doing is just setting up the pieces that you need to have the different information so that you'll be able to add this to maps and use it in your analysis later. So we start here. And what you'll remember from the pet survey is the first thing that you are asked is, do you have a pet? So we can start with that question and we can give our choices. Okay, so drag and drop and configuration over to the side. We can see a preview of what we're making and see what we have. And let's change it to make it a little shorter there. Okay, the other thing that's really important here is the map, because we do want to be able to put this onto the maps that we're making. Now, when you're doing this with students, it's important to talk about privacy as soon as you're asking them to place a dot on a map. Talk to them about what they might want to provide. Do you want to put it right on your house? No, let's use a major intersection nearby. If it's at our school, maybe we do want to put it right at, say, the tree that we're collecting, the plant that we're collecting, the classroom that we're adding. And in here, as you can see, now that I've added a map, I can choose if students are adding points, lines, or areas. So there's a bunch of different types of information there, and we're getting it all together now. The last thing I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to add a group of questions, because as you saw in the survey that Tom did, some questions appeared only if you said you had a pet. For example, one that we could put in there is a number that is dogs, like you saw in the survey you filled out. And now I talked a little bit about how we want to be asking good questions. So we have some good questions. Do you have a pet is pretty important if we're trying to gather data about the pets people have, and getting some information about those pets. And I'll just put dogs for now for the sake of time. But you can imagine adding the other questions here. And one of the things, let me jump back in here, that I also mentioned was that you want to be able to restrict the answers. So I don't want someone to come in and say, write a sentence, I have 3 dogs. Because when I look at this data, I want consistent data so that I can use it on my map without having to process a lot of it myself. So that's one of the reasons I chose just a moment ago to use a number choice. I could have used text. I could have used maybe stars and a rating, and you convert that to mean how many dogs. No, we don't need to make it complicated. Just use a number. Now, while we're in there using the number, you can also say things like, you can't have half a dog. Let's require an integer. And maybe we want to say, no, you really can't have any less than 0 dogs. I don't want to know about negative dogs. And maybe I want some realistic limits here. As you saw in Tom's, limited to 25, or in the pet survey, it was limited to at most 25. So we can go ahead and set up those things so that what we're doing now is we're asking good questions, we're restricting answers, and really we're looking at the variables that go into problem solving. Our ultimate question is, something about these pets, and we need to make sure we're asking the question so that we have the information we need to answer our question. Now, I've glossed over that a little bit, and that main question behind your survey is really important. That's something to spend some time on and make sure you have right, because that's going to guide you through this design process. Now, one other thing I want to show you how easy it is to set up was how in the pet survey you filled out, if you said yes, this other section appeared. Well, right now it appears all of the time, but I can set a rule and I can just say, if someone says, yes, I have a pet, then I want to show the pet info section. So now let's go ahead and preview our survey and see how it would look. What this does is actually lets us take a minute, look at our survey on different types of devices. You can see I can change it over here. I'm just going to stick to on the screen for now. But, good. I have my 2 questions just like I expected. I can say yes, and my other question appears. If I try to give half a pet, oh, it doesn't let me. That decimal point doesn't show up when I type it. If I give negative pets, nope, that's not happy either. All right. So that was a whirlwind tour of authoring. There's one other piece I know you saw as you filled out the survey if you have a pet, and if you didn't, I want to make sure you saw it, is how easy it is to add an image as well. So right now, someone can either browse for an image they already have or take one with their device's camera. And again, very simple process of drag and drop to create the survey that will collect the data I need to answer my question. Okay, so now we've looked a little bit about how we can author this survey. And you guys already got to fill out a survey about pets. So we have this chunk of data, but that data is not actually it. I need to start looking at that data, manipulating it a little bit, exploring it and playing with it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the answers that have been submitted to the survey so far. Now, this is more than just the answers you guys are submitting because we've opened this to anyone. And in fact, you can see quite a number of people have filled it out already. But we can see the breakdown. This is actually the app I'm using just to center for a minute because I've switched tabs here. If I jump back a tab in survey 123, there's an analyze area. And that's what this is. I'm looking at that information, but not of the survey we just built together, but of the one that you filled out. All right, so we can see the answers to the questions, and we can scroll down and see different graphs of the different information. We can see how many pets. We can also see how many are dogs. Let's look at reptiles and amphibians, rodents. All right, so you're getting a sense now, right? I can see the breakdown of this data in different buckets. But what isn't here? I'm scrolling, I'm seeing these great charts. I can see all the statistical information. I just love the pictures of pets. I find them great, right? Who doesn't love to look at cute cat and dog? And I even see a horse in their pictures. So that's all great, but this is special because it allows us to put a dot on a map. But in here, we have no map. So let's go and create a map. Now, the great thing is, since we're using ArcGIS to do this survey, this data is already in our same system, and we can bring it right on in. So here I have a map of those same surveys. You can click on one and see some information. That home has 5 pets. And you'll notice that my dots are larger the more pets are in the home. We can see that right on the side over here. Okay, so now I'm starting to use the data. But I liked the charts too. Well, we can work with that. Let's combine them. What I'm showing now is called a dashboard. And you'll remember this from the slide Tom showed, right? He said we're looking at things in map viewer, in a map, in a story map, all in a dashboard. A minute ago, we were looking at a map in map viewer, and now we're looking at a dashboard. And this one is showing some information about how many people have filled out the survey. And here's our total breakdown. Right now, the most common pet is dogs. That I expected that, especially right now. We can see where we're geographically located. We can see dogs per home, the number. Okay, I expect that more homes have 1 dog than 7. That would make sense to me. So now I'm taking that info and I'm combining it with different readings and visualizations. And I'm able to use that and learn a little bit more about my data. Now, yours might not be pet data. Again, it could be the restaurants that people want, and we could look at the distribution of the people and use that to help us say, hey, we really do need a new Mexican restaurant in this neighborhood. All right, but we're going to use the map combined with their answers to get a fuller picture of that data. Now, the other thing that we talked a little bit about is story maps. And while we're not going to dive into it, a story map, I want to show another example here of using one with this project. So in this case, I've taken my survey that I want to do, and I've wrapped it up in a story map so that I can give someone who's answering the survey a little bit of context. They can, just like you did, scan the QR code right here and fill out the survey, or if they keep scrolling, the survey's right here embedded for them, and they can take it actually as part of my story map. Now, the story maps that you saw earlier were more reports, right? So story maps have this wide use when it comes to projects. You can use them as a reporting mechanism. You can use them as a data collection mechanism. And really what it comes down to is communication, sharing and communicating through the story map and making the text and the images and the maps all work together to create that full picture. So in here, it actually goes farther than just collecting the data. It allows us to explore it, just like we talked about, and it gives some guidance on what you might want to explore. And you'll also see that dashboard that we were just looking at. So what is all this about? Okay, this was a whirlwind tour. What did we just look at? We looked at Survey 123 and using that as a tool for data collection. It is very popular with our K-12 audience. Great tool for quickly creating a survey, bringing in that map component, and getting survey data as close to your ideal as possible by restricting those answers and asking good questions, that you're able to take that data, put it into a map, put it into a dashboard, and ultimately build stories with data that only you and your students have. This is not data that's known elsewhere in the world. This is data they've collected. Their friends, their family members, their community, or even their global audience has contributed to. All right. With that whirlwind tour, I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie now.
That was awesome, Kylie, and thanks for that. I'm anxious to sit down and study some of those pets, but I want to make sure that we can shift the presentation over to Tom.
Well, as Charlie's bringing his screen up, the first thing that we want to talk about briefly is a special site we made for educators that are really interested in getting started with projects in GIS. We call it the GeoProject Hub, and you can see the URL there on screen. It's esriurl.com/geoprojects. You can see the homepage there, but you can also see an example of some of the kinds of things that are available on this hub site. So, for example, you can find some pre-built working examples of projects just like you've seen today. There are additional projects on apportionment, sound mapping, we covered the round mile. There must be dozens in there at this point. So if you just want to go in and experiment with some more projects, what you have up on screen is actually an example project called Trash Cache, where students can map the collection or the natural accumulation of trash on a campus. Map it out and figure out if it makes sense, for example, to put waste receptacles in different locations around campus. But the idea is on the GeoProject site, it will also walk you through step-by-step how to build your own type of largely field data collection projects. You can, if you've already got one running, can also share out your own project. There's a registry near the bottom of the homepage. But just as you saw with Kylie, the project examples will walk you through creating that Survey 123, and then also how to work with the results set, whether it's in dashboard or inside of Survey 123 properly. So again, GeoProject Hub, it's a great resource, especially for starting out. Charlie?
Thanks, Tom. And yeah, those projects are neat for people to see and get accustomed to, and especially early in the year. But what happens when students are getting comfortable with some of these things and they want to go off and they want to do something that is on their own? Well, hey, we've been thinking about that. And yes, indeed, we have a competition that is for high school students, grades 9 through 12, and middle school students, grades 4 through 8, that is done by students, teams, either solo or a team of 2, And it is an independent research project that it needs to be about something in their state. And so typically students will practice the things that they have done or they have seen being done. And so what we want people to do is to expose students through the year and through the years on projects. Get them accustomed to going through this, because this is what people do all the time in their adult job, is they're doing projects. Now, if one of the cool things is that we have listeners, watchers from beyond the United States. So folks out there beyond the US, this is a competition just for US students, but you guys can be running some competitions like this as well. And heck, teachers who are saying, yep, I want to get my kids ready for this to be done in the springtime, but we could do something like this at a small way in the fall and the winter, get them ready for this. I'm actually going to pull out of my presentation here and take you to that whole big ArcGIS online school competition website, because what you'll see here is we've got the results from 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21. We got 5 years of results in here. You can go down and take a look and see what it is that students have done. And from the 2021 year, you can see even little webinar excerpts with the winners and go in and take a look at their particular projects easily, and the honorable mentions as well. Then you can go in and explore the map. This is a live interactive map. You can go in and take a look at all the projects from the winners at the state, the awardees at the state level, all the way down through 5 years. It's a great set of projects that students have done and that you can have people doing, you could have your students doing as well. So esriurl.com/AGO School Comp, and that will get you to that hub site where you can look at all the results and the rules for this year and the resources. So, man, we have been racing through this because it's exciting. There's a lot to cover, and so I'm going to move ahead here. We've wanted to give you a set of links that are important. So you could take a screenshot of a webinar, so you'll be able to get access to these links, or you can say, hey, I just want to see that one thing, whether it's the PET survey or the GeoProjects. All of these are important for you. This schools site is where you can get mapping software. We also have club kits. If you're a homeschool, if you're a small club doing projects and you want to do it this way, we've got little temporary small group logins available for you. Makes it a little bit easier. If you're just getting started with GIS, you can go to the Getting Started document. Kylie put together a really nice story map about these different apps that are available for doing field data collection, apps in schools. And then here's the competition. And then there are resources where you can learn more and more and more. So we've tried to cover a lot of ground in here. We anticipate that you'll have some questions, and you can go ahead and put them into the chat. We're going to handle questions a little bit differently. But first of all, I want to say thank you, huge thank you to our special guests, our twins who teach, Brittany Wedland and Alyssa Larson, and they're in Big Lake High School in Big Lake, Minnesota. And if you've got questions, you can write them in the chat, or you can send them to schools@esri.com. That reaches Tom and Kylie and me, and we're open to these questions. We answer questions all the time. If you're just looking for information and you just need one address to go to esri.com/schools. So we've tried to put it all together for you. Thank you all for giving your time and giving to the students all that you do, and give to the teachers as well. All you GIS professionals out there who are listening in, help the teachers in your community as well. Thanks, and Barbary, I'm gonna send it back to you.
Thanks, Charlie. Great job, everyone. We hope that you'll stop by directionsmag.com and watch more webinars. We'll be in touch via email with the latest recording as well as your attendance certificate, and we appreciate your opinions on our survey on the way out. Go make it a great day and tell a friend about Directions Magazine and Esri Education Resources.